Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight over the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave, land of the free, home of the brave.
Please welcome the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, representing the 2nd District of Pennsylvania, Congressman Shaka Fattah.
Well, welcome to our annual Legislative Conference 2013. This is our National Town Hall meeting. We have a great group of panelists, the mayors of Baltimore and Newark, and of course, the mayor of the greatest city in America, Philadelphia. We have a legal mind without peer as a moderator with Professor Ogletree. But as chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, I first want to thank our sponsors because they have helped us create an annual legislative conference that we believe will be extraordinary, with some over 100 separate workshops and activities for us to learn and network one from another. So we want to welcome you all here, and for lawmakers and activists and community leaders from all across the country, on behalf of the foundation and its board and our extraordinary leadership, our CEO, Sharnice Washington, I want to welcome you. And I know that over the next few days, we'll have a chance to really build on this theme, which is that it starts with you. Now, I'll close with this. A few decades ago, too, Reverend Otis Moss was preaching at our prayer breakfast for this Congressional Black Caucus activity, and he said that don't come to Washington thinking about what someone else is doing. Come to Washington thinking about what it is that you can do. And so when we say that it starts with you, the point is that both in symbol and substance, you are the hope of our entire nation in terms of uplifting the African American community and other similarly situated communities. Working together, we know we can make and be the change that our nation needs. But it starts with each of us as individuals, and then working together in a collaborative fashion. So we welcome you, and this is going to be an awesome town hall meeting. Give yourselves a round of applause for participating.
Please welcome Chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge.
Thank you, Chairman Fattah, and I want to welcome you all to today's National Town Hall meeting. This morning, we will take an in-depth look at the impact poverty, violence, education, and economic opportunity have on African American youth. We do know that homicide has become the leading cause of death for African American youth between the ages of 10 and 24, with 3/4 of them murdered by firearms. And many of these victims are more than 3 times more likely to live in extreme poverty than their white counterparts. Coupled with low prospects for quality education, economic opportunity, entrepreneurship training, African American youth have become one of the most vulnerable populations in the United States. We must act now to have serious conversations that will result in concrete solutions to help save our children. Today, we will look at ways in which we can lower the risks of African American youth by helping to create a safe and vibrant environment for them to live, to learn, and to explore the world. We also will discuss how policymakers like myself can play a role in promoting legislation and supporting initiatives that ensure positive changes and economic opportunity in our communities. And before we begin this morning, I would like to take this moment to thank CBCF Chairman Congressman Shaka Fattah, CBCF President Ms. A. Shawnice Washington, and this year's ALC co-chairs, Congresswoman Donna Edwards and Congressman Cedric Richmond. Thank you for your continued service to the CBC and the CBCF, and we thank each of you for attending today's town hall and for your support of the Congressional Black Caucus and the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation. Thank you.
Now joining us with special remarks from the White House is Ms. Raquel Russell, Deputy Assistant to the President for Urban Affairs and Economic Mobility.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. Thank you to the CBCF and to the CBC and the leadership and partnership that they have shown the Obama administration and the White House over the last 4.5 years. I wanted to be here today, and I'm excited to be here today because these are the issues that I have been charged with by the President of the United States to work on. Really thinking about how do we provide every child with a great start to life? How do we make sure every child has a chance to make it in America? And really looking also at our urban communities, our urban neighborhoods, and how we can really revitalize those communities. And these are issues that the President himself are 100% committed to. So I'm excited to be here, and I know today's panel is going to be an excellent panel and an amazing conversation around these issues. Many of you probably heard over the last several months the President talking about ladders of opportunity and creating ladders of opportunity for all Americans. And when we talk about this, when the President talks about this, we're really thinking about 5 building blocks. Number 1 is education. Education being a key to economic opportunity, the great equalizer in this country, as well as early learning, early childhood, making sure that every child has a great start to life and a strong family to grow up in. But we also recognize that we need to revitalize and strengthen our communities that we live in, and that urban revitalization is a key part of economic opportunity and lifting people out of poverty. Third, we have pathways to jobs, recognizing that we need to focus on our youth as well as the long-term unemployed, that in creating economic opportunity, a job is core to creating economic opportunity. And lastly, economic security. It is a shame that in this country of ours, that a single mother can work full-time, providing for her family, and still have her family growing up in poverty. And that's something we need to change, and working with Congress to raise the minimum wage. So as I expect this conversation to be a great one to speak to some of those issues as well as many more, I look forward to continuing to work with all of you, the local leaders, the local communities, the community organizations, those on the ground, to really create lives of opportunity for all Americans. And in the next 3.5 years, this is something the president is going to be committed to. And quite frankly, I think it's going to be something he's going to work on post-presidency as well. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all. And again, looking forward to this great conversation. Thanks, everyone.
Please welcome the President and CEO of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, Ms. A. Shawnice Washington.
Good morning. Good morning. As President and Chief Executive Officer of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation, it is my pleasure to welcome you to our 43rd Annual Legislative Conference. Today's town hall is just one of several opportunities over the next few days to participate in issue forums and brain trusts focused on the topics that matter most to you, and importantly, the global Black community. This morning's dialogue would not be possible without the hard work demonstrated by our Board of Directors, Corporate Advisory Council, staff volunteers, and fellows of the CBCF. And also let me take a moment to thank our sponsor, without whom this morning would not be possible, and that would be Google. And you'll hear more about the Google Hangouts that will also be an official part of the town hall. Now back to our fellows. Their dedication and commitment to the foundation is unmatched, and we are especially proud of our 2013 class of Congressional Black Caucus Fellows. Allow me to introduce them. Ms. Jillian Johnson, Education Fellow. Ms. Alvinia McQueen, Lewis Stokes, Urban Health Policy Fellow. Mr. Thomas Brunette, also a Louis Stokes Urban Health Policy Fellow. Mr. Larkus Pickett, Energy Fellow. Mr. Michael Bayham, Energy Fellow. Ms. Reese Everson, Congressional Fellow. Mr. Thomas Cuffey, Science and Technology Fellow. Ms. Tiffany Robeson, Courts and Judiciary Fellow. And Ms. Janelle Johnson, Donald M. Payne, Foreign Policy Fellow. Please join me in giving them a rousing round of applause. A summary of today's town hall will be compiled by our fellows and will be available later today on our mobile app, CBCF ALC 13, made possible by Facebook, our official app sponsor. Here you will also find an updated schedule of events, the exhibitor lists, and other up-to-the-minute conference information. And if you haven't already, please visit the App Store and download our app. Again, it's CBCF ALC 13. As I close, let me encourage each of you to join us for the grand opening of the exhibit showcase at noon today. The showcase is home to over 200 exhibiting businesses, agencies, and organizations. And this year, we have added an enterprise pavilion where private sector businesses and government agencies are available to discuss job opportunities and small business contract opportunities. Minority business entrepreneurs are encouraged to stop by to learn about private-public sector procurement opportunities and how to position themselves to successfully compete for these opportunities. The hall will be open today from noon to 7, Friday 9 to 6, and on Saturday from 8 to 1 p.m. Lastly, thank you once again for attending our 43rd Annual Legislative Conference. Your presence and participation is significant because we know that the information you glean will enable you to become the change you want to see in your community. Remember, it starts with you. Don't forget to tweet, follow us at hashtag CBCFALC13 or hashtag It Starts With You, and our Twitter handle is CBCFINC. Thank you so much and enjoy the morning.
Please welcome the co-chairs of this year's annual legislative conference, representing Maryland's 4th Congressional District, Congresswoman Donna Edwards, and Congressman Cedric Richmond, representing Louisiana's 2nd Congressional District.
Thank you, and welcome to the 43rd Annual Legislative Conference. Thank you all so much for being here. It's a really important opportunity, and it's been a delight to share the work and the stage with my co-chair from Louisiana, Cedric Richmond. I want to thank all of you for being here. The issues that we discuss here today are so vital to all of our communities and critical to our communities and the future of our young people. I want to thank you not just for showing up, but for taking the information that you've gathered and that you will gather throughout the conference, and then taking that home, because it really does start with you. It can't be said enough that we need your help, every single one of you, for the vital work that we need to do. Thank you. And my co-chair, Cedric Richmond.
Thank you, Congresswoman Edwards. It's been a pleasure to be co-chair with you, which in plain English means it's been a delight to follow your directions and orders for the last couple of months. Welcome, friends. As Congresswoman Edwards stated, today we're going to dive into an issue that is very personal to both of us. From Maryland to Louisiana, the plight of our African-American youth and our families is an issue that is very vital to not only the African-American community, but the country as a whole. And today you will see through our distinguished panel of guests that it is an issue that is very complex, but we are very willing, capable, and able to dive into. So let me just tell you, and I will introduce for you today our moderator, which is Harvard Law professor and founder of the school's Charles Hamilton Houston Institute for Race and Justice, and author, Dr. Charles Ogletree. You just picked your own entrance.
Good seeing you. Good morning, Washington, D.C. Well, we've got a great program today and some great folks from the CBC and mayors from around the nation talking about the issues that are critical to our community. I'm happy to be moderating this discussion today. Just a few ground rules. We only have time for a few questions because everything's so tight. And I apologize now to people who are anxious to ask a question but won't have time to do it. And I'll just repeat the thing that I learned many, many years ago, that a phenomenal, brilliant question is one that has no more than 8 words. So you've got an hour to now prepare your question and cut it down and cut it down and cut it down until you can get some details on it that make a lot of sense. Let me introduce the people who are going to be on our panel today, and they will be coming here to be seated. First, from the Maryland 4th Congressional District and a co-chair of this organization, please welcome Representative Donna Edwards. There she goes. Second, please welcome from the Louisiana 2nd Congressional District and also a co-chair, Representative Cedric Richmond. Third, we're very happy to have here a person who's been very active in the business community, Dr. Calvin Mackey, who's the managing partner of Channel Zero Group, the LLC, and he's also the chair of the Louisiana Council on the Social Status of Black Boys and Men. Please welcome Dr. Calvin Mackey. We're so pleased to have these wonderful mayors with us today, and one from the great city of Philadelphia. Please welcome Mayor Michael Nutter. The other from the city of my wife's birth, the great city of Baltimore, Maryland. Please welcome Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake. And finally, we call him mayor, but he's more than that. He's going to be an African-American senator from the state of New Jersey. Please welcome Newark, New Jersey Mayor Cory Booker. Later in the discussion, we will be joined by the CBCF Emerging Leaders intern, Andre Washington. He's a recent graduate of Morehouse College, and he's also currently interning in the office of Senator Mary Landrieu of Louisiana. And I'll introduce him in more details later. Also, like the others who have mentioned, I want to thank the two great sponsors for this CBC conference here in Washington, D.C., and that is Google and Facebook for their great and generous contributions. And we also want to give a very warm welcome for our participants joining us via Google Hangout. And I want you to say hello to them and wave to them on screen. Place first the Google Hangout cities, the folks from Chicago. Next, we're going to have the wonderful people, and wave to them as well on the screen, the people from the city of Atlanta. And the biggest and the most significant city in the country, please welcome and wave to the people from the city of New York, New York. And finally, it's very early, but please wave to them out on the West Coast, the left coast, the people from the city of San Francisco. This first segment will be a review of black-on-black crime and racial inequities in the criminal justice system with a heightened emphasis on young black youth and poverty. And what are the root causes behind black-on-black crime, and how do we negotiate the lack of socioeconomic opportunity in a way that creates and sustains real progress for black youth? State and local initiatives combined with community-based approaches will be discussed as a lens to remedy violence-plagued communities, and solutions will be proposed for how to empower individuals and communities. And I asked our panel to talk about this, and the reality is that since we have so little time, I want to make sure that your answers are succinct and focused. But the first question is, what do we do about crime in our cities, and how do we respond to it? I'm going to go first to Mayor Michael Nutter in the sense of what's happening in Philadelphia.
Thanks, Professor, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to be here at the Congressional Black Caucus in this great town hall. We've certainly had our challenges over the past few years in Philadelphia. Give you a little bit of context very, very quickly. Homicides are coming down in the city of Philadelphia, but that's as a result of great community engagement, better partnership with the Philadelphia Police Department, a few more boots on the ground, but it really is about trying to empower young people to better understand that they have different options and different outcomes. Investing in education, I think, is the #1 priority. That's how you're going to drive your crime rate down, as well as dealing with folks who may have made a mistake in life, have a previous criminal record, and making sure that they can re-enter society and not carry that mark on their forehead for the rest of their lives. And so, since I've been in office, if you look at year-to-date compared to 2007, we're down 40% in homicides in the city of Philadelphia. But nonetheless, I'll take that. Nonetheless, still a great, great challenge. 75% of homicide victims in the city of Philadelphia, black men. 80% of the folks arrested for homicide in Philadelphia, black men. And so black-on-black crime is a serious issue. We have to discuss it. We cannot avoid it or evade it or act like it's not going on. But fortunately, as I mentioned, we've seen some positive results over the past few years. I think that making recreation activities that much more available, we've invested in that. Town Watch programs, reorienting government services in the neighborhood and asking people what their needs are. Not that government has all the answers, but we have some services that we can provide. And I think that is a part of the solution to crime and activity. Illegal guns, lastly, are the great scourge of the United States of America. Illegal guns and getting guns out of the hands of young people and others in our communities ultimately will make it safer for all of us in the United States of America.
Now, I'm going to go in just a minute to the two women from Maryland, but I want to go next to Mayor Cory Booker. because Newark is on the map. You've been there for a very long time, and you have been on the ground in a sense that instead of just talking about legislation, talking about changing things, you've been going to places, meeting people. What is the mayor's job in trying to deal with public safety in a community, and what are you doing in Newark?
Well, I could talk a lot about what we're doing in Newark, but to me, the root of the larger problem is that the United States of America, we have a massive problem with violence. And it is affecting every single city. There's some really talented mayors to my left who are doing incredible jobs and pushing the levels down. But when you deal with crime, you're dealing with a symptom of a much deeper problem. And so we have a criminal justice system that is, in my opinion, a massive failure. It is actually driving what I think is the biggest waste of taxpayer dollars, billions and billions and billions of dollars. It is making our communities less safe. It is eroding the productivity of large swaths of people. It is freezing massive inequities in terms of poverty, in terms of race. New Jersey, for example, is 14% African-American population. Our prison population is over 60% black. And unless we start talking about these in a larger context, you have mayors like the three of us who are fighting every single day on this issue, but we're dealing with forces that we actually don't have the levers to pull. The overwhelming majority of weapons that are used on my streets, as Mayor Nutter pointed out, don't come from the city of Newark. They don't come from the state of New Jersey in many ways too, if you look at a lot of the data. So my point is that we need massive change. Number one, in the way we do criminal justice in America. We need to make sure we end this incarceration nation that we have. And we need to start dealing with a lot of the root causes of violence, which actually start a lot earlier than people realize. And I'll end with this vignette. We had a 14-year-old murdered in our city about 2 weeks ago. 14 years old. But he had been arrested already 5 times. In fact, and first time when he was around 12 years old. In fact, 85% of the murder victims in my city, 85% of the murder victims have been arrested before an average of 10 times. And so you see the young 14-year-old, when we went to his apartment, his home, into his bedroom, we found bricks of heroin, a loaded gun. And so if you think this is an issue of policing, you're absolutely wrong. If you start to look at what we're not doing for our communities and our society in terms of everything from prenatal care, nurse-family partnerships, early childhood education, dealing with the crushing blow of poverty and inequity in America that's getting worse in terms of social mobility, this is where we need to start focusing our policy. And I end with a note of optimism. We have the power and the capacity to do things about these problems. It's not an issue of can we. This is not rocket science. It's an issue of do we have in the United States of America the collective will. And if we show that collective will, then we as a nation will not only help folks that are low income, it actually helps the entire nation by growing GDP, by expanding productivity, by nurturing this nation's most valuable resource, most valuable natural resource, which is not oil and gas, but the genius of the children of America.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. We were mentioning a number of these cities who are represented here, but we're very pleased to have one of the deans of the Congressional Black Caucus and a successor to the great mayors from the city, congressmen from the city of New York, both Adam Clayton Powell Sr. and Jr. Please welcome to the stage the great Congressman Charles Rangel.
Wow! Thank you so much for coming to help us out with the major problems that we face as a nation. And what an outstanding panel, with the exception of my colleague who, he's the kid brother I never had. He's so good. And of course, Don, I didn't know I was just carried away with the mayors that I admire so much. Some days I have a nightmare that I was drafted to be mayor because of the responsibility. But I just want you to know that the problems that they are facing as mayors is a problem that we face as a nation. Not too long ago, I thought that there would be a vote in the House where I would be asked to allow the President of the United States to bomb another country with the possibility of there being the loss of life, which we don't call it that, we call it collateral damage. And the word was then, if you could just see 400 kids that have died by this chemical gas, you would know with no uncertain terms that we don't need constitutional authority to have this humane response to an international obligation. And as I go through my congressional district and see all of these kids out in front of undertaking parlors, sometimes I know the family, sometimes I go to the funerals, and if I really wanted to be moved emotionally, I'd go to the morgues, because I don't have to go to Syria to see children dead. And so the failure of our government, knowing that they have the potential to get excited every time there is a mass killing, to realize that we got 2 million people, human beings, locked up as animals in cages. It's a very, very expensive operation. Secondly, for kids to want to kill other kids, we have psychiatrists and psychologists who know what causes human beings to do it. And you don't have to be trained to know that they don't think too much of where they're going to end up when they get older, because if they did, they wouldn't kill each other. Which means that the question of self-esteem and education and dreaming for a job and being somebody, it doesn't exist. Now, I'm out of the business at my age of trying to convince the Congress or the country to do the right and the moral thing. Just when I thought that John Lewis provided the movement that we were almost there, then comes different tea and coffee parties that have different ideas about where our great country should go. And so it means right back to the drawing board, only this time we have to include the United States Supreme Court and the Congress. Having said that, it just seems to me that you, and us, we have to not tolerate the death of children, whether it's a threat to our national security, since they only want young people without jobs to enlist and to fight these wars, or whether it's a threat to our ability to compete with other nations because we don't have the degrees and the skills and the technology. And so for me, this is going to be a national security problem, and I hope I can relieve the mayors of having to explain why this happens, because you don't have to be a social worker to know that people want to live when they have something that they want to live for. And so I thank these mayors. I want you to change the conversation for me, because I am a veteran. I love this country, and I can't stand to see the cancer of kids killing kids cause my country not to continue to be a world-leading country. So it's the moral thing to do. I don't hear too much from our religious leaders. As a matter of fact, as we discuss tax reform, I'm going to have to go back and see why they were tax exempt in the first place. Well, on the question, no on same-sex marriage, they're together, but on the question of poverty and food stamps and war and health care, Their silence is deafening, but I'll handle that. But we don't hear from the business world. So let's save our country once again. We did it with civil rights. Let's do it for those that are locked up in jail. Let's give our kids a chance, educate them, let them know that in this country, foreigners can make it here, and they can too. God bless. Have a great conference. Thank all of you for coming. We love you. Thank you for being here. And he is absolutely the best legal mind we have in our great country. Thank you, Jeff.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Congressman Rangel. I'm going to now call, we have a special guest here, and she just has a very brief remarks for everybody, and I asked the panel for their patience. I know that time is running, but we're very happy to have the chairwoman of the Democratic National Committee and representative from our great state. Please welcome to the stage Debbie Wasserman Schultz.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ogletree, and thank you for your strong leadership in academia and civil rights and social justice. And to my Congressional Black Caucus colleagues, it is wonderful to be here with all of you, and it is particularly a joy to be here with a number of fellow DNC members, our great DNC Secretary, Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, as well as DNC member Mayor Michael Nutter, and the next senator from the great state of New Jersey, Cory Booker. I'm done with my paid political advertisement now. I also, of course, want to thank my colleague and friend, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, who leads the CBC with boldness and fierce determination. She's always been a hard-working champion of social and economic progress. This year's chairs of the annual legislative conference, Representative Cedric Richmond and my girlfriend Donna Edwards, congratulations to both of you on what I know has already been an incredibly successful week of information and inspiration for everyone. For the past 3 years, I've had the pleasure of working with my CBC colleagues not only on important legislative issues facing the Congress, but also as chair of the Democratic National Committee. The CBC and the Democratic Party have been partners through the years because we recognize the importance of equality, fairness, and opportunity for everyone. We believe in lifting people up out of poverty while strengthening and growing the middle class. We believe in making sure that we fight for good-paying jobs, to give people tools for home ownership, quality education for their kids, affordable health care coverage, and of course, a secure retirement. These are modest expectations, and they are realistic expectations. And as public servants, we must do everything we can to deliver on them. There is a sacred tradition in America. If you work hard, you will reap the rewards. In this country, we believe that even if you are born into poverty, everyone should have an opportunity to achieve prosperity. This year's ALC theme is perfectly attuned to the times we are living in, because as we emerge from the shadow of the worst recession since the Great Depression, we have a chance to build new structures that allow talented, hard-working Americans to get ahead. President Obama calls them ladders of opportunity, and they begin with providing all Americans with an education that equips them with the skills they need for the jobs of the 21st century. During the recession, the African-American community was particularly hard hit by unemployment. Now that our economy is recovering, we must make investments in our future and particularly in our children. This means that all children should have access to high-quality learning from birth to age 5 when they begin school. That's one feature of President Obama's Preschool for All initiative, and I know the CBC has embraced this initiative and will work hard alongside all of our members to pass legislation in Congress. We must also make sure that our children have a chance to identify their interests and talents with an eye toward a professional career. For this to happen, more of our children must grow up knowing that when high school ends, they have the opportunity to attend college. The best protection against economic downturns like the one we've just experienced is a college education. President Obama has made affordable higher education a key priority in his second term. Pell Grants are the primary form of financial aid that students use for tuition. 8 million students in America depend on them, including more than 50% of African American students. The President has worked to double the amount of funding available for Pell Grants because he believes, like I do, that every student who qualifies for a Pell Grant should receive one. This is just one example of how we will nurture our children from cradle to career. And if we can achieve this, we will ensure durable, sustainable prosperity for all children, no matter their economic conditions or their background. But we owe children more than that if we want their futures to be bright. They cannot possibly get a good education and go on to a fulfilling career unless they have a healthy and safe start. That means that we can't send our most vulnerable children to school hungry, and they must feel safe in the communities where they live, learn, and play. Research shows that when kids show up to school hungry, they can't focus or learn. Doubling down on the devastating cuts to programs in the federal Farm Bill, particularly the SNAP program, will adversely impact children's health and nutrition and could have long-term effects. We must keep fighting to make sure that families who are struggling and trying to make the best choices for their children can do so. It is all too clear that too many of our children have fallen victim to senseless gun violence. We must have the courage to pass common sense laws that ensure that guns don't end up in the hands of dangerous people. These are just some of the priorities for President Obama, the Democratic Party, and the Congressional Black Caucus. Priorities that help move individuals and families from poverty to progress and prosperity. As a member of Congress and the chair of the DNC, I look forward to working with my colleagues in the CBC and all of you to see them into reality. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz. We're now joined by one of the new generation of people who are making a difference in America. And I was happy to introduce him by name before, but he's going to come out with us now. Please welcome Morehouse graduate and working with Senator of Louisiana. Please welcome to the podium, Andre Washington. Two quick things before I get to the question, to this final question to this panel. Number one, who came to the town hall meeting for the CBC in 2005? Raise your hand, okay. And you remember there were two people who were walking around and they were both senators. And I said something then, in 2005, I said, these are the next presidents of the United States, either Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama. And people said, oh, what is he talking about, right? And Barack Obama became elected. Who voted for Barack Obama in 2008 or 2012 or 2000, either one of those times or both of them? Would you raise your hands? Okay. Now that's significant because in 2014, Barack Obama is not on the ballot. In 2010, he was not on the ballot. And the Congress here, particularly CBC would tell you about it, there was a congressional majority of people in the House of Representatives who were Democrats. They lost that in 2010 because we didn't vote. The president will not be on the ballot in 2014, and I think that's important that we have to vote. And that has to be an issue that we have to talk about today. With the little time I have left, let me go to the folks particularly who have dealt with the issues in a very significant way. The mayor of Baltimore and the representative from Maryland. What do we need to do to talk about public safety in the 21st century? What's happening in Baltimore, what needs to happen, and what can we do legislatively? What can we do from the point of view of the city? We'll start with the mayor first.
Thank you very much.
Is that microphone on?
I hope.
No. There it is. Okay, now we're hearing you.
Can you hear me?
I heard the noise. I didn't hear you. There we go. All right, they're turning it up. Good.
Possibly.
There you go.
All right, I'll just do the best that I can.
Perfect.
First, thank you very much for the opportunity to share the stage with such dynamic leaders and talk about something that is very close to my heart and something that is so vital to our communities. You know, I think if we want to talk about the root causes of the violence that we see in our community, as Mayor Nutter and Mayor Booker said, there's so many things that contribute to it. But one of the things that troubles me as a mayor and troubles me as a mother is the lack of humanity that I see with our young black men on the streets that are, in most cases in our streets, the perpetrators and the victims of this violence. And it troubles me as a mother because I saw it. I worked as a public defender for almost 10 years in Baltimore, and I saw the impact of broken families on young people, the impact of drug addiction. And it's not just the parents that are absent because of drug addiction, it's grandparents too, and kids sometimes doing the best they can to raise themselves. Kids who are growing up in communities where there's very little glimmer of hope. Communities, like many urban areas in Baltimore, we have neighborhoods that have suffered from disinvestment. So there's blight, many vacant homes. So if you walk out of your house, you see neglect. When you go to school, we have the oldest school buildings in the state. You don't see any value that, or that anyone values you even in your school. So we have young people who have been told in so many different ways that they're worthless, and told long enough that they're starting to believe it. So when they get involved in violence, these patterns of violence, and they end up killing each other on the street, when everybody's looking for somebody else to do something about it, we're affirming that they're worthless. You know, as mayors, I think that some of us, they come to us and, where's your outrage? Where's your outrage? And I always say, what has that ever done? So these kids need somebody to love them, you know, to wrap their arms around them. And Mayor Nutter talked about it when he talked about the individuals in his city that are coming back from jail. We have a whole group of people who we have to figure out how we're going to reach. You know, we have a million ways to do it, whether it's through the churches, through our social organizations. You know, I can go on, neighborhood organizations, I can go on and on and on. But we have to figure out how to reach these, this community who lives in the shadows, in violence and in fear. And we have to break through to this community. And we have to figure out a way to do it in partnership with police, public safety officers in many of our cities who are seen as the enemy. I always say that until we bridge that gap, many people hate to live in fear and danger, but the way the police treat them in some of our cities, they hate the police more. So they're not willing to be a partner. So we have, I think, a lot of healing to do and a lot of self-reflecting to do, because we can't just be mad and indignant. We have to figure out a way to wrap our minds and our hearts around a population that is in pain and a population that has been abandoned in so many ways.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. And I think some people know, but Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake's father was also very much a prominent leader in Baltimore when he was one of the great people of the 20th century. And I think we need to make sure we understand that we have to pass this on to the next generation. Someone who's been doing amazing work in Maryland as well, both in the Black Caucus, but also in her district as well. Please welcome with comments from Representative Donna Edwards.
Thank you very much. Not quite sure if this microphone is working. Thank you very much. It's great to be here with all of our panelists. And I have to tell you, I so admire our mayors because you really are on the front lines of every single thing that it is that we do as policymakers here in Washington. And so we need your guidance and your leadership, and we just appreciate your work. You know, I think, you know, sometimes when we're tracking what's happening in our families and our communities, I look back, my father grew up in one of the poorest sections of West Philadelphia, but there was not violence. And so it isn't just about poverty, and clearly those are things that we have to work on, but there's something else that's going on in our communities. In Maryland, Baltimore is one of the largest cities in the country. Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake leads that city, but in our state, you know, we look at what's happening, and it is the things that are happening in poor communities. And I live in Prince George's County in Maryland, which is one of the, you know, wealthiest African-American communities in the country. We talk about that all the time, but it's not as though we don't share some of these same problems. And so clearly there's something deeply systemic that's going on. I visited recently in one of our prisons, our nearby prisons, and I talked with mostly young people who were there, young people who were women and men. Almost to a one, those young people grew up in homes where they experienced and witnessed violence. And so I think we have to look deeply at what's happening in some of our homes, and then use that to create opportunities for our young people. I'm the mother of a 25-year-old. I know what it means to try to grow a young Black man when there are so many things that seem stacked against them, even when they're doing the right things. And I think that that is part of our challenge as well. And so as I think about my experience, Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, as I think about my experience as a mother trying to grow this young child in sometimes a very hostile environment, where constantly a young man is being told what he can't do and what he can't be, instead of being told what he can be and what he can do. And so those are challenges for us. Now, we're not looking to somebody else to raise our children, but those are issues that we have to face. And it does take our church communities. It's not enough in our faith communities just to minister to the people who are within those walls. Our job, the job of our faith communities, is outside the walls of those churches and those faith institutions. Our job also in education. We always had poor schools and not equipped schools. It didn't mean that we couldn't learn. But we need to make sure that our schools are equipped for the 21st century so that our young people will have the ability to take advantages of the 21st century. And so I don't know that it's one thing or another, but I know that sitting here in this room, that every single one of us, myself included, can find something that we can do that touches the life of a child and a family and cures our community. Every single one of us, and it's not just government alone, it's not just our faith communities alone, it's not just our communities writ large, and it certainly isn't just left to elected officials, because I think our mayors would tell you that we can put a badge on every single person in this room. And no matter how much money we spend in that criminal justice system, it's not going to bring justice to our community, it's not going to bring social justice to our community, and it's not going to bring equality of opportunity. And so I thank you for being here, and I want each one of us to take that charge when we leave this room.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Donna F. We're going to get a brief comment from Congressman Cedric Richmond from Louisiana to talk about the problem in Louisiana and what can be done to address it. And then we're going to have a Google question from Chicago immediately following that before we end this segment. Congressman?
Well,
yeah, you're on.
I hear. For me, in growing up in New Orleans, I think that it's very simple. It's all about economic opportunity, and it's a sense of hopelessness that is in the African American community. And the Black Caucus, we recognize it. We're led by an outstanding woman from Ohio, Congresswoman Marsha Fudge. We have to make sure that we don't continue to speak in theory, that we actually deal with what's happening in reality. What my kids and my friends say on the streets of New Orleans is that we're going to get it one way or the other. We're going to get it how we live. And the question becomes, if we don't focus on disadvantaged businesses, minority-owned businesses, include them in economic pie, they're the ones that will hire an ex-offender. They're the ones who will give a young black male his first job. So if we do not bring this conversation back to economic opportunity, then I think we're doing ourselves a disservice. And the one thing I did hear from Mayor Blake and from Congresswoman Edwards is that what our kids hear over and over again, they start to believe. Muhammad Ali used to say he's the greatest, he's the greatest, he's the greatest. Someone asked him one day, why do you always say that? He said, if I say it enough, people start to believe it. Yep. But what do our kids hear? You ain't nothing, your daddy wasn't nothing, and when you grow up, you ain't gonna be nothing. And we have to change that. We have to set a high bar of expectations. And I think that the person that is best able to set those expectations for our young black males and our young black females is the person who has attained more than anyone else of our color. And that is the President of the United States. And I am urging him to set that bar. As a Little League coach, my kids never, ever talked about going to Harvard. When the president was elected, they said, we're going to Harvard. I said, what do you even know about Harvard? I know I have to make good grades, stay in school, do right, but I want to go to Harvard because the president went to Harvard. And I think that we have to set those expectations, build a culture so they can make it. And as much as, Dr. Ogletree, as much as I admire Harvard and talk about Harvard, I would like to point out there are 3 men on this stage who went to Morehouse. And it's not by, It's not by...
And one that married a Morehouse man.
And one that married a Morehouse man. She's probably the smartest of us all. I would just say that it's not a coincidence. We have to push our children. We have to make sure that we give them the opportunity to succeed, and that's what we firmly believe in the Legislative Black Caucus, and we will continue to do. And the one thing I would close with is that it's just because we're in this setting with our African-American friends and family, just because you're of my color doesn't mean you're of my kind. And just because you're of my kind doesn't mean you have to be my color. We need to make sure that we hold everyone accountable in terms of making an environment in which our children and our families can succeed.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. You will be hearing quite a bit from Honoré Washington and from Dr. Mackey. We're going to do 2 more segments, one on economics and one on education as well, which ties back to this issue. The failure of the criminal justice system means that it's failing in terms of job preparation and also for the idea of education, who's dropping out. We have 7,000 African Americans dropping out of high school every single day, 7,000. Just think about what that means for our community when we get to that. We're now going to take a Google question from Chicago for the panel, and you'll be able to hear it live and be able to respond to it. Can we get the question out? It's coming. Oh. Go ahead, we can hear you.
Can you?
Yes. Go ahead. Ask your question.
Amina Nevels.
Go ahead, ask your question, Anita.
Hi, my name is Amina Nevels. I'm a Chicago native, born and raised. I'm also a mother of 2 and a lifestyle blogger at Mama Mina. My question is directed to all of the panelists, and it is as follows. Unfortunately, Chicago has been coined one of the most dangerous cities in the U.S. In fact, many of our young citizens are referring to our beloved city as Chirac. What are you doing in your individual districts and cities to reduce crime and to encourage young people to think differently about their city and their future? And what steps can Chicagoans take to encourage our congressional representatives to fervently advocate for drastic changes on our behalf?
Thank you for your question. I'm going to go actually first to Dr. Calvin Mackey. In addition to being the partner, the managing partner of the Channel Zero Group, he's also the chair of the Louisiana Council on the Social Status of Black Boys and Men. What's happening in your community, and what are the lessons for Chicago? And then Honoré, I want you to talk about it as well as a young black male, how you avoided that, and what's the lesson for young people? Dr. Mackey? Okay.
First, I'd like to say thank you, Professor Ogletree. Thank you, Congresswoman and Congressman Cedric Richmond for having me. Actually, I worked for Congressman Richmond. I'm in his district in New Orleans, and a couple of years ago, he started a council, the Louisiana Council on the Social Status of Black Boys and Black Men, just to look at the issues that's impacting Black boys and Black men in the state of Louisiana. And that which we found in Louisiana is very comparable to that which we found in Chicago. Carla, thank you for your question. Chicago may be called Chirac, but Louisiana has the highest incarceration rate per capita, if not the world, the nation, because Louisiana has the highest incarceration rate in America. America has the highest incarceration rate per capita in the world. In Louisiana, we have 38,000 people in jail, and 29,000 of them are black males. On a per capita, in terms of black males getting killed on the streets of New Orleans, it doesn't even compare to Chicago when you look at it from a per capita stand basis. So the bottom line is that what we boil this thing down to is that we have to look at 3 things. That's mindset, assets, and skill sets. All of the things that you've heard here, like education. Education speaks to skill set. When you look at jobs, that skill set, education is asset and skill set, but we have not talked about mindset. And we keep talking about Pookie and Ray Ray and the young brothers in the hood, but we're actually losing our black males in the middle class.
That's right.
So this is not just about poverty and picking people up from poverty. There's a mindset in our community that's absolutely killing us that we have to address as individuals. I'm non-elected, so I don't have to, hope people agree with what I'm saying. We out there working with nonviolent ex-offenders on a daily basis, and we know this young lady in Chicago. A young man, to validate his existence, gonna do one or more of three things. He gonna make something, take something, and or break something. And we don't give them the skills, we don't give them the education, and we don't give them the mindset to make something. They will take something and or break something. And now we're seeing that actually in the middle class. You spoke about Prince George County, assets. Talked about Prince George County, DeKalb County in Atlanta, resources, assets. But we still don't have the mindset to understand that a community must be child-centered, adult-governed, and elderly ruled. Everyone has a role. Everyone has a role in solving this problem, and it doesn't start up here with policy. It starts with the pimp, the preacher, the pusher, and everybody else in our community that say they want to make a difference. So economics, yes. Education, yes. But we got to get to this spiritual thing, this mindset that would have our kids go out and kill each other because they don't like each other, they hate each other. And in closing, if we know all this is going on, garbage in does not equal garbage out. Garbage in equals garbage in. And there's a lot of people in our community that are putting garbage in the eyes, ears, and minds of our children, and very few people are willing to stand up and call them out for what they're doing. Either you with us or against us, and as a community, we got to make that decision.
Thank you, Dr. Mackey. Let me ask you one additional question before we go to Henri. The idea, part of who you're calling out, in addition to clergy, et cetera, who have to do something, is business. The whole idea that there are a lot of black businesses, and a lot of them aren't hiring young folks. What's the challenge if you want to deal with the public safety issue? How are you going to make sure that people are going to get jobs?
Well, right now in New Orleans, we are mentoring. I have an alternative energy company, and in the alternative energy company, we take waste streams and we turn into biofuels. We are pretty much the only black commercial producer of alternative fuel in the nation right now. And in my micro refinery, we have ex-dope dealers and drug dealers all the way up to PhDs working together. And again, when we work with our ex-cons, when we work with the young men coming out of high school, we work with the young men and women coming out of college, we go back to the same three things: assets, skill sets, and mindsets. You can have the assets, you can have the skill set, but if you don't have the mindset, then there's nothing I can do for you. I'm in business to make money. That's the purpose of whether computer chips or potato chips. My goal is to turn a profit at the end of the day. And the bottom line is that I need you to have the right mindset coming into my business. I don't care if you're ex-con, ex whatever, because all of us are ex-something. I need you to have the mindset to understand. 85% of the people, if the Secretary from Labor was here, he'll tell you that 85% of the people that lose their job not because of a lack of skill sets or lack of resources. They lose their job because of the thing in their mind. Coming to work late, not showing up on time, can't keep their pee clean, just don't do Twittering and twatting on Facebook, on everything but on the job, twerking, doing everything but on the job. So my point is, as a business owner, and I own 3 of them, and I hired people out of my community, and I fired my sister because she didn't have the right mindset. No. Because my sister didn't understand that this is the way I feed my family. And I tried to get a mindset to the point of understanding that when you understand this is the way you feed your family, then you're going to behave more like me. So the bottom line is that we have to get our young people in the jails and the schools to understand that there's a certain mindset that they need, that they have to possess to operate in the 21st century, and especially from a business owner. And I mean, I work with business owners in New Orleans that continuously lay off black males, and we go and we put in a framework for mentoring, and I'm trying to help the black males, but they have a mindset, many of them, that look, man, you know, I'm gonna get it how I live. You know, as soon as they get a check, they're gone. Essence come to town, they pee dirty. I mean, it's just absolutely unbelievable, and those are the things we have to address. We can't, that's not no policy. That's right. Community, and we have to address that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate the fact that you are employing all of these people, but I think this is the next Senator Calvin Mackey from the state of Louisiana. You got my vote.
Not if he fired his sister.
Henri, what about young people? You made it so far, but a lot of people didn't make it. What's the difference? What is it that we need to talk to young people about?
Well, first of all, thank you to the CBCF for allowing me to be up here and represent millennial generation, and for not quelling out the voice of the youth. I'd also like to thank my program coordinator, Mr. Rontel Beatty, for allowing me to be up here. First thing I'll say is that I made it the first conversation I had with myself is with my spirituality. My relationship with God is what got me here and what allowed me to thrive, but that spirituality was given to me through my family. I was raised in a great family with great values. So those are the first two critical institutions, yourself and your relationship with your Creator, and the second is your family. Unfortunately, for a lot of African Americans and kids across the country, they don't have the benefit of necessarily being born into a family with that value, with those values, because we've lost a generation of sorts to poverty and to urban violence. Because joblessness, back in the day, 40 years ago, it was the working poor. You know, you were working, you weren't making much money, but you were making enough to put some food on the table when your kids saw you get up early in the morning, go to work all day, come home late, working hard and sticking to it. And now we have the phenomenon for the past 40 years of the jobless poor, which is a totally different level of poverty. So you have people that don't have to look at statistics to know that they don't have much hope for the American dream, because the American dream and prosperity is defined by materialism. What you get, the house you drive, the house you live in, the car you drive, whether or not your jewelry is this, that, and the third, and then what you see on TV and this, that, and the third. And it's not just impoverished folks, it's middle class folks ascribing to exert a certain status by what you wear and how you display yourself. So the American dream isn't rooted in deep intrinsic values, which it should be. It's rooted in materialism, which is dangerous. That is dangerous because not everybody's going to be able to make a lot of money. And what's going on is that the bottom two rungs of the ladder, of the socioeconomic ladder, have been knocked off. So you can't start from the bottom and likely make it to the top. You got to start from the middle or the top and hold on for dear life. And that's troubling, because the prospects for kids across the country need to be that this country has a moral obligation to care for people in the sunrise of their life, kids, sunset of their life, the elderly, and the shadows of their life, the people who don't have access to those opportunities. So I would recommend, for me, and for the other people that don't have the benefit of a good family or growing up into a beloved community or getting access to a morals education, make sure that your public school option provides them with the opportunity to get a quality education and go to college or secondary, some type of post-secondary skill-based school, or enter into the workforce with a mentorship program that will evolve them and change them. Because I don't have to be a statistician or a PhD to know that even if I do get out of high school, there are very few jobs that are going to be available to me. And even if I do make it to college, student debt is going to weigh me down so much so that I'm going to have to work 2 and 3 jobs just to make it. The idea of middle class, what generations before us were born into, we don't necessarily have access to as millennials. So we've got to redefine prosperity as low debt, access to a job that is able to pay my bills where every check is in a crisis. I'm able to provide for my family and live comfortably and live smartly. Not necessarily a big house, 2 luxury cars, 2.5 kids, and this idea that's rooted in material and not rooted in deep values such as hard work and being able to thrive with what you have going on.
Great, thank you so much, appreciate it. We're going to begin our second segment. We're going to have a question from the Atlanta Google question in just a second. I hope that will be ready and tied up. And here's the economic opportunity and minority business development, which is very much tied into the first and also tied into the third, education. This segment will focus on re-entry of ex-offenders into society and creating a robust pipeline of economic opportunity for them. Given the unemployment rate for blacks continues to be twice as high as that of whites, not to mention the abysmally high unemployment rate for black youth, combined with the fact that there are close to 2 million black-owned firms in the United States, but under 11,000 of those firms have employees. What particular offenders are able to get a job there? This conversation will center on the extent to which the correlation of poverty and unemployment explain black-on-black crime and the real possibilities for black business owners and the black middle class at large to play a critical and necessary role in elevating black unemployment and providing black men and women in the prison system with opportunities of socioeconomic advancement when re-entering society. And we're going to now have the first question for this segment coming from the Atlanta Google group. And if that person will put the question here, we'll be ready to go. And we can hear you. There they are. Applaud the folks from Atlanta.
Hey. Hey. Okay, so my name is Penny Yakabi. I go to Georgia State here in Atlanta. I'm a senior and I major in accounting. My question is for any of the panelists on there. What role do you think the youth have in helping with the disparity of unemployment and the rise of Black business owners?
Great question. I'm going to start with you, Andre, and anybody else can respond. Andre?
Well, I think for the youth and for us, it's important to, one, use the levers that are available to us, making sure we get an education, making sure that we use our education to empower folks, and make sure that you don't make just a business just to make money, but you make businesses that are designed to change lives. So I would encourage people who have entrepreneurial aspirations to not quell the ideas that you have. You're given ideas and you're given dreams for a reason, to make yourself uncomfortable where you are and to ascribe to doing something else. So first point, make sure that the ideas that you have, you begin to actualize them. Start thinking about how to incorporate them, how to patent them, and how to work those things. As far as building businesses, making sure that you are, if you want to go into a certain field, you know, one of the things that I was educated to do is I want to go into public service. So it's a blessing that I'm on the stage with great public servants that I can learn from, and many of whom have no idea who I am, but I know very well who they are and what they've done and read their works and everything else. So without even understanding it, they've mentored me. So to those that want to go into tech or into STEM or to medicine, look at the people that are doing what they're doing great in those fields, study what they did and where they've gone and how they've done it, and look to model yourself after those things, especially when it comes to businesses. What businesses work, what businesses fails. For example, Mayor Booker is a Rhodes Scholar who studied American history when he went to Europe. He has no idea that I knew that, but again, it's someone that have never had an opportunity to meet, but I know about him because that's where I'm ascribing to go. So look at the people that you want to model yourself after. And that doesn't have to be folks that are nationally syndicated. My grandmother taught me a lot of lessons in her kitchen about patience and about doing things in love and about being consistent and persistent. Don't forsake the mentors at any level. Anybody can teach you something. So one, map it out and use the levers that are available to you. Two, look at folks that are doing what you want to do and model yourself after them and don't make the same mistakes that they did. And number three, don't forsake the folks that you have around you and in your life. Don't think that just because they're older or they don't have a PhD. Granny ain't got nothing but a high school education, but she's given me more life skills than any other person that I've encountered.
Great. I want to make sure we talk to Dr. Mackey and to Congresswoman Edwards about ex-offenders. What are we doing, seeing the relationship between crime in the past and the whole idea of jobs?
See, here's the issue. I'm an engineer, and we have to start with the facts. The facts are, in the world, there's 7 billion people. Out of 7 billion people, there's 5 billion people over the age of 15. Jim Clifton, in his book, Coming Jobs, said there's only 3 billion people that say they want a good job. There's only 1.2 billion good jobs in the world. In America, there's 300 million people, there's 150 million people looking for work every day. Every day there's 15 million people unemployed or 15 million people underemployed. So that means every day there's 30 million people unemployed, and out of that 30 million, they say there's 18 million that have no hope of ever finding a job. Now, within there are our ex-felons. We have to understand, nobody gives a damn about you. When we get that into our children's head, that there's nobody outside this building planning for their future, then maybe it'll change their mindset. I was a professor at Tulane for 12 years. I got a PhD in engineering. In the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, the president of Tulane decided to keep the football team to eliminate the engineering program. I lost a 6-figure tenure job overnight with 8 people living in my house, a wife and 2 kids that eat. I could have turned to my congressman, I could have turned to my mayor, but they was dealing with their own problems. They were trying to rebuild the city of New Orleans. I had to do something to take care of me and mine. My daddy was a roofer. As long as I got 2 hands, there's something I can do. So my bottom line is that the brothers in jail, when we go in there and we work with them, I'm like, you're not doing time. Use this time for something. Use this time such that, you know, you can get a transferable skill such that when you can get out, you can provide a service that people will otherwise pay for. And I mean, you know, we got brothers locked up, 2 million of them sitting there learning how to hustle better. And we got to challenge them to use that time to develop skills to get to the place where they need to be. So once we understand that Zuckerberg is in Congress fighting for the immigration bill because he doesn't think that you're going to do what you need to do to hire you, when we understand that Bill Gates go to Congress every year and fight for more HB, F1, whatever visas because you don't have the skills such that he would hire you, Then when we understand that in California, 18 months ago, they pushed a button and made a handful of billionaires and a whole lot of millionaires, and none of them look like us. We're going to understand what we need to be doing with our kids every day, every hour, every minute, and that's not running a basketball or dunking a pill. They need to be in things like STEM. They need to be in things like coding. We need to be giving them skills. And that's from the ex-felon. That's from the ex-felon to Barack Obama children. They need to be doing that.
And let me just ask you a word about this. I want to go to Congresswoman Edwards in just a moment, then to the three mayors. The question is, people watching this or viewing it online may think, oh, there's a black problem as opposed to an American problem when you talk about people who are unemployed. It's not that people don't want to work, they can't find jobs. How do you make that clear?
They can't find jobs, and this is what a politician is not going to tell you. The jobs are not coming back. They're not coming back. I've spent 20 years as an engineer in making sure that we need fewer and fewer people. The only jobs that come in are the jobs that we create. And that is the point I'm trying to get us to understand. And I went to a Chinese restaurant yesterday and the food was good, but I didn't see one black person working in a Chinese restaurant. I went to an Italian restaurant the other night and the food was great. I didn't see one black person at an Italian restaurant. Until we get the mindset that we got to do for ourselves and create our own and bring the policy that they put in place to life, then we're going to be challenged. So getting back to the ex-felon, because we keep going there, and I'm saying that I don't really know if that's the root of the issue, because they got people who don't have the X on them, with skills, with degrees, and can't find jobs. So we got to be about the business of creating jobs, and if I was a mayor, probably never happened. My sole focus, every day, I would eat, sleep, and dream about how do I create jobs in my city, because that's the only thing that's going to make a difference.
Congresswoman Edwards?
Yeah, I want to go to where Cedric Richmond left us earlier, and it is about expanding entrepreneurial opportunities, because when you create community-based jobs, those people actually hire people in communities. The fastest growing segment of entrepreneurs is actually young black women. And young black women hire other men and women in our communities. But it's not as simple as saying, go out there and be an entrepreneur. The fact is that there are policy changes that we need. We have to expand access to capital for those entrepreneurs. We have to make sure that we, whether it's transportation contracts or other kinds of things, that those opportunities are actually available to our entrepreneurs in our communities who are creating jobs, and that is about policy change. I mean, people who have all of the resources, if it's a prime contractor, for example, isn't just going to willingly give up their business, and so there need to be policy changes at the state and the local and the federal level that make sure that those opportunities are also available to our entrepreneurs. The other thing that I will say is that it really pains me greatly that even as we have a lot of young people going to college, and we applaud you for doing that, there's a huge mismatch between the skill set that you're coming out of college with and your degree and the workforce. And we have to match the skill set to the one that we need for the 21st century. And it's true, some of those jobs that you're talking about, they're never coming back. But you know what will be here? Advanced manufacturing and technology. And if we're still producing students who, God love you, that you want to study, philosophy and all of those things, that's great. But there may only be so many opportunities with that kind of degree. And so we have to make sure that you're coming out, because the debt load that you're bearing when you're coming out of school has to be repaid, and it cannot be repaid if there's not a job in the workforce. And so, we need a combination of those policies. And then as to ex-offenders, and I think I share this, concern about the larger job pool, but there are specific things that we can do. We can, meeting with our business community, our larger business community, and making it okay to hire ex-offenders, making sure that those returning citizens can get a Pell Grant and can go to school, because right now they're prohibited. And so there are specific things that we can do that expand opportunity. And I will say lastly, 2 years ago, the Department of Labor convened a conference of people from all across the country who were working on matching the business community with our ex-offender programs, our returning citizens, to try to pave a way for them to begin to hire people who are coming back into our communities. And mayors, I know that you have to be at the forefront of making sure that you make it easy for the business community to do that, because when you do, they will hire.
Thank you. This is a question for Congressman Richmond and the three mayors. And this is you can pass on this question if you want to, but I'm trying to dig a little bit deeper. Are you going to businesses and saying that you need to hire us? Because they do need to hire us in a real way. And I say that because if you think about 60 years ago, it was commonplace for the civil rights groups to say that the doors were closed, blacks and browns were not allowed to work in a lot of public sector jobs and private jobs, hotels, restaurants, all these places. Are you having any success, and can you do that? Can you, in a sense, out a company saying you need to improve your representation of diverse women and men on the front line? And I'll give you one example. Every person in this room is from a state or a city that received billions of dollars in the plan that the president had approved by Congress in 2009 to improve highways everywhere. You look and you see everybody working. I've looked in every state, and even in this city of Washington, D.C., I don't see a lot of women, I don't see a lot of blacks, I don't see a lot of Hispanics who are involved in the construction of roads, highways, things of that nature in our cities and states. What are we doing, and what can we do? I'll start with Congressman Richmond.
Well, not only do I do it, I think it's an obligation. And let me just give you the simple example. Many people are hired, people call them lobbyists, to come talk to congressmen and women every day. Many times, organizations will come in to talk to me with not one African American in the room. And you have to ask the question. Y'all couldn't find one to come talk to me? How can I talk about SWAC football? Because y'all don't know SWAC football. And I don't want to talk about SEC football, I want to talk about SWAC. I want to talk about Lil Wayne. I don't want to talk about Britney Spears.
Interpret that for the folks who are watching. May not understand that SWAC is the African American League as opposed to SEC.
HBCU football. So part of it is that we have to challenge them to hire African Americans because I think that is part of our role. So we take it very seriously, and I think that our mayors have the ability to do that as they let contracts and other things to make sure that you can't say you have to do it, but you certainly can set let them know that is your expectation that they should do it. And we have to continue to hold them accountable. The other thing that we have to do, and if I was one of those people that write books and stuff, I would title my book that ice is 32 degrees Fahrenheit, black ice and white ice. And when black folks understand that and we start to patronize our own and demand that our own are at the table, then I think that we will continue to make a difference. But it's something we have to do, and I'll close with the stimulus. The stimulus was not as effective as it could have been, and you saw the different hiring because it went to governors.
Right.
It should have gone to mayors, because mayors understand the community. And our governor, which still is Bobby Jindal, took great pride in saying,
we don't want it.
We don't want it. And then gave all the money to the Association of General Contractors, to the big boys who didn't hire any new people, and went around cutting ribbons and doing grand openings and groundbreakings all around the state with this big check with his name on it, and the money came from the president. And we need to make sure, that's why I always stress, and I fought the Ivy Leagues for this, Professor, so don't be too mad at me. We need to stop playing in theory and deal in reality. In theory, yeah, it's a great idea to give it to the governors because they run the state. But in reality, it's not going to get to the people that needs to get to. So we need to make sure that we give things to people who can make a difference. And I would tell you that the stimulus would have been the best thing in the world and a game changer for generations had the money gone to these three mayors on this stage. They would have created wealth, economic development in every neighborhood, and we just need to make sure that we do things and we keep that mindset of trying to make sure we do things that make a difference.
Let me go to Senator Booker, and then we're going to all the other two ayors. Senator Booker, what about this idea? I'm sorry, Mayor Booker. One step at a time.
So first of all, I'm very proud to be a mayor from the great state of New Jersey and the great city of Newark.
In the city of Newark.
Yes, and it's the biggest blessing of my life. And as the congressman said, all the mayors I know, from Mayor Brown in Buffalo all the way down to Mayor Reed in Atlanta, and so many mayors, we're all in the same trench. We all are doing things every single day to bring business development back to our cities, to make sure that there's not just inclusion, but there's robust participation by local contractors, by local populations. We've all done things to expand apprenticeship programs so our kids could get into the construction trades, and I'm very proud to be one of many great entrepreneurial mayors in America. But it's very important to me that I turn back to a theme that goes back really to this idea of reentry, which I think the Congresswoman said so correctly. I could go to any church in my city and stand up on Father's Day and give a great 10-minute, 5-minute speech about daddies, if you bring a child into this world, that doesn't make you a father, you must raise your child and all of that. And people would agree with me and applaud. But that's not getting it done. And I can preach to folks about personal responsibility till I'm blue in the face and tell the truth, because my daddy and mommy preached it to me. But the point is, that's not getting it done. And so what I loved and I heard from the folks up here is if you reduced a lot of what they were saying, Congresswoman said, Stephanie said it, we've got to get to this understanding that it is time for us to do things differently, to have a rebellious love, a defiant love, an innovative love that gets things changed. And I'll give you simply this example. There is a powerful problem. 71% of my kids are being born to single mothers that are in poverty, that many of them are young themselves. Many of them find themselves working full-time jobs and another job and still living below the poverty line. And I can't go to them and sort of preach to them about lifting themselves out of their condition when they're doing everything and playing by the rules. Some of them, in fact, have been A and B students and find themselves in my community college being told that even though they did everything right and they were told they were A, B students, they don't qualify to do college level courses. And then they eat through their Pell Grants, taking remedial classes,
right?
Okay? Taking remedial classes that we paid as taxpayers to give them that education in the first place. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we have to find a different way. And so that brings me to the pragmatism that we all must embrace. We found out in Newark, for example, that guys coming home from prison, if you ask them, do you want to be a great dad? They would say unequivocally yes. But then if you ask them what necessarily that meant, they did not necessarily know because they didn't have a model. So one of the things we started was a fatherhood program. We wanted to create a fraternity. I was not in one in college, but we called it Delta Alpha Delta Sigma, dads, where we gave guys a rebellious love. We put them together with a mentor father who loved them, who taught them. We gave parenting classes to these fellas. We not only did that, but understand there's an economic incentive. People just don't fall through the cracks because they want to. They fall through the cracks because people have left massive pitfalls for them to fall into. Please understand, the majority of people that go to the prison with a disease, addiction, alcohol or drugs, don't get treatment. And then they come out and we condemn them for falling into the hole that we left open. So what we found out is many guys don't want to go to the woman who's the mother of their children. Why? Because their child support payments have been collecting in arrears and they can't find a job. And the woman rightfully says, where is my money? So we brought the women and the men together to to work through those issues, group activities for their kids. Lo and behold, we took a recidivism rate in New Jersey incredibly high, 50, 60%, and for the program we have, it's now down below 10%, around 7%. Now this is an example, and this is why my friend here, who must work for the NSA because he knows more about me than most, this is a reason why we cannot just sit in a state of sedentary agitation where we're so upset about the way the world is, and that somebody should show some personal responsibility, somebody in office should fix this, when we have the power ourselves. I am here today because when my dad was born, just like the majority of my children, to a single mother, poor, in a segregated environment, and his mom and his grandma couldn't take care of him. And no, in my city, as I'm sure in their city, about 10% of my kids are being raised by their grandparents. When my dad's family couldn't take care of him, who stepped up? The community did. When my dad could not afford college and college affordability rates, they didn't wait for a government program. Folks who barely had $2 to rub together gave my dad $1 to afford his first semester's tuition at North Carolina Central University. When my father got to Washington, D.C., where I was born, he couldn't get a job. Companies weren't hiring blacks. And it was the activism of folks like the Urban League that opened those doors for my father. Nobody preached to him about personal responsibility. My father's one of the hardest working men I knew, but every step of his life, even moving into the town I grew up in, it was the activism of folks in the Fair Housing Council that broke housing segregation in New Jersey and allowed my family to move in. And so if we think that anything is going to change unless we do, we are wrong. That's right. And what I'm looking for, just to finish, is to say I will not be called to do freedom rides. I will never be called to be John Lewis and stare down Alabama state troopers coming after me with billy clubs and tear gas. But as my father said to me, don't you dare walk around here like you hit a triple. You were born on third base. We who have the privilege of calling ourselves Americans need to not stop pointing the fingers at others and say that we have got to do something rebellious. And it's not asking our congresspeople or mayors, because I tell you, I know the two mayors left of me, they are two of they are the James Browns of being mayors in America, the hardest working mayors I know. But ultimately, when I look at my city and cities across America, and there are thousands of kids to single moms, where the mamas do the right thing and sign them up for the Big Brothers, Little Brothers program, and there are not folks stepping up to simply give 4 hours a month to mentor. The amount of time we spend watching our favorite TV shows, that's all it is. Give up one TV show and mentor a kid. And so I really think that we need that level of engagement, activism, sacrifice, and service to break these things, to break these challenges. We don't need a new playbook. We need to remember what got us here and begin to do it again.
Let me ask you one question.
There it is.
Mayor Booker has to leave because of a prior engagement in just a few minutes. I ask one question for you to tell this audience, because it's about economic opportunity. Successes that you've had in trying to persuade businesses to hire folks who are formerly incarcerated, people who don't have jobs. Tell us stories about success, what you've had to do as the mayor to make things happen.
We created New Jersey's first Office of Reentry.
Okay.
We have evidence-based programs where we contract with ministers and others, and we don't pay them unless they get people hired.
Yep.
We then go out and work with companies to help them get people hired. We created the nation's first pro bono legal service project because, as you know, guys come out of prison with so many administrative law problems. They can't find an ID. They come out of prisons with warrants for their arrest because they had a traffic ticket that they failed to show up in court to, and while they're in prison, they couldn't show up to court, so it becomes a bench warrant for their arrest. And so we blame these guys with all these pitfalls when all they need is some legal support, somebody advocating for them, somebody working with them to get soft skills that nobody ever did. And I learned this the hard way because and I know these mayors have the same stories. When I first came into office, I was gung-ho. I would meet with people in my apartment It's 8 o'clock. Anybody, you guys know this. Sometimes you think your name is, I know when you walk around, your first name is I, your second name is Need, and your last name is a job. Because we hear that every day. And so I would meet with people at I'd always say, if you need a job, prove it to me, show up at 6 a.m. at my apartment. And guys would show up and I would sit with them and I'd go out and beg people to hire them. And we'd get maybe 10 of them hired. And then when they get their first paycheck, they wouldn't come back. And so we knew they had to get soft skills. And so we worked with them on that because they didn't wake up in a house like I did where the first sound I heard on a snow day at first grade was my father out there shoveling the driveway because he was going to get to work no matter what. And so what I'm telling you is there are solutions to these problems. We've shown dramatic ability to reduce recidivism, to place people in jobs. And I think what the Congresswoman said so eloquently is this does fall for public policy. And let me tell you something that might surprise you. One of the best partners I have in my reentry programs is a right-leaning think tank, the Manhattan Institute. Now, why is that? Because this is not a black issue. It is not a white issue. It is an American issue. It is a justice issue because they understand the greatest waste of government dollars right now is how much money we spend incarcerating the same people over and over again. They understand that we're killing and eating away the economic productivity of American citizens and that we're making our streets unsafe. And so we have to understand that we can create uncommon coalitions to create uncommon results. And that ultimately, as King framed the civil rights movement and others, this is going to be the difference between America succeeding or failing. And so I want to just say finally in prayer, because I'm sitting on the stage with heroic people that go from 20-something to late 20s. I love Stephanie.
I love exactly that.
And this is just really my prayer, is that we as a community understand that in so many ways, just like Italians have played roles in American history, so many groups have played roles. The great thing about the black community is we have worked from the abolitionist movement to the voting rights movement to the civil rights to be a conscience to our country and to prick the moral imagination of a nation, every generation, showing, as many other groups have, that we can be a country that makes real what our children say is a chorus to our conscience, that we can be a country of liberty and justice for all. But really what we have to understand is that nothing will change unless we do.
That's right.
And if we do the same things we did last year and are expecting our nation to be different, then we are betraying the legacy we've inherited. And so the call to our country is not to other folks, it's to ourselves. What different am I able to do this year? And real leadership, and these folks know it because I watch them, real leadership isn't, hey, everybody watch me and follow me. Great leaders are ones that awaken other people that they must lead too. Great people are the ones that make other people realize that they themselves are great. The power of the people is always greater than the people in power. And what we're lacking now is the next great American movement that can deal with the core issues that is threatening this country. Income stratification, declining social mobility, increasing child poverty. These should be unifying forces to our country, but we need a grassroots movement of people taking personal responsibility, not just for themselves, but for their brothers and their sisters as well.
Thank you. We have comments coming from the other two mayors. I know you have to leave, Mayor Booker. Let me just ask one final question. Are the things you mentioned about reentry, et cetera, on your website? Can you give us that website? And since everybody here is running for something, how can people contribute? There is a limit. If they're from a different state to your campaign for Senate, how would they do that?
Well, you can go, first of all, this is a nonprofit, so I'm not gonna sort of directly answer that question, but on CoreyBooker.com, you can find everything you want to know.
Everything you want to know.
Except for the information that might be deeper to harder to find, so go to this gentleman afterwards, and you can find out even more information about me. But thank you very much.
Thanks so much for Mayor Cory Booker.
See you.
Quickly, two mayors, last comments about have you met with business people in your community to get jobs?
Yes, we have. Yes, I have. I think at least every black mayor is finding innovative ways to force the companies that are benefiting from our city to employ our people. That being said, One thing my hope is that we can talk about is changing that paradigm. We've spent the last, I think, 50 years trying to make sure that our people had a piece of the pie instead of becoming bakers. And we are in an innovation, you know, Mr. Mackey said it himself, it is an innovative, not economy locally or statewide, globally. It is an innovation economy. And we can continue along the path of trying to make sure our people have a little, you know, a little piece, or we can blow the roof off the thing and try to teach people how to create jobs. I was so proud of Baltimore this week. The Minority Business Development Administration gave Baltimore City, the only city out of the 7 that applied, was actually directly given the funds for our Minority Business Center. And it was a $900,000 grant. And I have to think, it was in part due to the work that we're doing. I said to the minority business community in Baltimore, I want the country to know, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a small business, if you're a minority business, a women-owned business, and you want to be successful, I want anyone to know that Baltimore is a place to be. And I know that you can teach me how to make that happen. What do I need to do? What are the steps? What are the foundation to make that happen? And I worked diligently, brought them all together, and we've created a pathway. Now we have this other incentive with the assistance of the Obama administration, with the Minority Business Development Center, to get that going. But we got to figure out how we're going to get these innovation jobs, focus on the STEM education. All of these things are important. Fighting and making sure the people that are doing business with our cities are employing our people that's good, but the long range has to be making our own pie, not just splitting up the one that's available.
Thank you so much. And we're going to go to the third segment on education in just a minute with the New York Google question to lead us off. Finally, Mayor Nutter.
Just quickly, on the reentry side, I've focused our administration in particular on that issue. We have an office, it's called RISE, Reintegration Services for ex-offenders. And working with employers, I've personally talked to employers about the need to hire folks who have a previous criminal record. Actually, the Congresswoman and I have not coordinated on this, but I also refer to those folks as returning citizens. I want to get rid of the other word. 10% of the folks who have come into the government since I've been mayor, excluding public safety, 10% of the folks who have come into employment in the city of Philadelphia government have a previous criminal record. I cannot ask a business person to do what I'm not prepared to do myself. We give any business that hires a person with a previous criminal record a $10,000 tax credit against their business tax obligation to the city of Philadelphia for up to 3 years. And the program, much like Mayor Booker talked about, through RISE and working with these employers, we have a recidivism rate that is in the single digits. We had an expo fair, a jobs fair at our convention center, much like this one in Philadelphia about a month or so ago. 3,200 people pre-registered for that, with 100 employers showing up, and over 2,500 folks actually came through the doors trying to work. So it is a lie, it is a myth that folks who are unemployed in general, but certainly with a previous criminal record, that they don't want to work. They want to work. They want to get off of those street corners. It is too dangerous. There is no health care out there. And if you get a job, nobody's looking for you. So folks want to work. And to Congressman Richmond's point, I think in a quiet conversation, if you talk to many of the cabinet secretaries and others who were directly involved with the economic recovery plan, they will tell you that more of those dollars should have gone directly to cities, directly to mayors. We would have spent those dollars differently. We were not able, because of tremendous restrictions, you could not even apply your own local minority and female and disabled business guidelines and aspirational goals to those federal dollars. We were prohibited from doing that. But in Philadelphia, during my time, we're now up at a 28% utilization rate by minority, female, and disabled business owners. A number of years ago, those figures were in single digits. We do a disparity study. We look at who's out there, who's available, constantly pushing, especially on the construction side, for African Americans and women and Latinos to get into the trades. There's nothing wrong with working with your hands.
That's right.
It can get a little hot out there sometime, at least in Philly. It can get a little cold out there, but there's a lot of work to be done. And we need to break down those barriers for folks who have been left out and locked out of that particular industry. There are opportunities out here, and I think Reverend Dr. Mackey talking about mindset. You actually do have to come to work every day.
Yeah.
It would be nice if you were on time. It would be great if you didn't curse out your boss on the second day that you have your job. Just, you know, show up, do what you need to do. I tell folks, come early, stay late, and try to move up the economic ranks. You know, you really, this one will probably get me in trouble. When you come for the interview, it would be great if you had a belt on and could keep your pants up. That would really be nice. You can do that for some of the young people out there. And lastly, don't be afraid, as the young man talked about, any success that I've ever had, and I've had a few jobs in my time, any success that I've ever had, I've had a mentor. I've had someone who was willing to take a chance and work with me, but I encourage every person in this audience, you can be a mentor, not asking you to take on an extra job. You can go to a school. Read to second graders, talk about your job to middle schoolers, and if any of you can figure out actually how to get high school students excited about anything, to actually pay attention to anything that you're saying, because being cool is their main thing. Let me assure you, even though it may seem that they're not really paying attention, they are. They're listening to you, but they listen to what we say and they watch what we do.
Absolutely.
And they can tell the difference between those two things. Go into a school, tell your story. Every one of us has had rough times. We made a mistake. We weren't always the successful people that we are today. They need to hear those stories. How did you get from point A to point B and all the stuff that happened in between? That is a very important story to tell our young people, no matter who you are.
Oh, I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to go to the last segment in just a moment. The first question coming to the New York Google question. After I read the focus of this session, I'm hoping that before we end it, that all of the people here who have websites will let people know who are streaming this or watching this or involved in it, how they can find out about the initiatives, the bills, the legislation, the acts that you've been involved in. If there's a way you can tell them, go to this website, you can find all of it. So now we're going to go in just a second to the New York Google question. And here's the third segment, education reform. This segment will focus on urban education reform in particular and what public policies help or hinder equitable access to quality education for black youth. Panelists will provide commentary on many of the following top topics, but they're not limited to these. They are charter versus public schools, racial disparities and institutional disciplinary action, early child education, student loans, teacher accountability, federal and local public policies and initiatives, and or the role of the family. Any one of those issues, you can talk about them. Let's first hear the question from the New York Google question.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Paul Prasad, and I'm the National Project Manager at the National Action Network. Our president and founder is Reverend Al Sharpton. And my question is, since the student loan debt has just overtaken credit card debt as the largest total consumer debt in the nation, what do you think policymakers can do to help reverse this spiraling trend that impacts all Americans?
Great question. Who wants to take that one first? Student loans?
I can talk about student loans.
Andre?
So, as a recent graduate of Morehouse College, I commenced May 19, 2013. It was a great day. I come out with just about the same amount of student loan debt as every other student. It's upwards, close to $30,000, or in that range. And I'm comfortable talking about that because I know most other students who want to get an education have to incur that amount of debt. There are two things that I'm willing to go into debt for: my education and when I buy a home. Two things I'm willing to go into that amount of debt for. What I don't think should happen is I don't think there should be a rising cost of higher education because it becomes an industry, because you know that the only way for people to thrive and get jobs is to make sure that they have this higher education. So we're going to make sure that we tack on every expense and cost and make tuition expensive and make sure that in order to get an education is going to be extremely costly, because then it becomes a replication of class, because you can't get access to certain education unless you have certain tutoring programs to get in certain SATs or LSATs to get in certain schools. And if you're in an urban environment, you have to deal with the challenge of needing to make up for the education or lack thereof that you're getting in the classroom, but before school education, after school, tutoring programs and everything else. So when it comes to student loans, it is important that the government ensure that public education, again, equips people with the skills to get access to scholarships and to do well in higher education. And then also public institutions of higher education control their costs, and not have these costs explode year after year after year. Because when people take on student loans, I had a conversation earlier, it's transactional. You don't see the money. You know, it's one entity moving from the next. So you don't see for years the amount of money that you're going to be spending until you get 6 months after, you start getting phone calls and you're like, oh, wait a minute, I got to pay this, and this is going to be expensive. And then the economy that we're inheriting, it's less likely that we get in jobs that are paying comparable to the amount of loans that we're taking out. And if we want a chance again at middle class, working class, or upper class as far as income goes, we have to make sure that the cost for education is comparable for the money that we're making, and that we don't allow institutions to exploit people's desire for social mobility, because that's unfair.
Mayor Nutter?
Yeah, I would, and this is, I think ultimately it really is a national issue, but I would push very strongly, given what I do for a living, I would push very, very strongly for debt forgiveness for those who go into public service. I mean, it is a well-known fact that first, in public service, you will make no money anyway, and most who have tried usually end up in jail. So, you know, it's just, you know, you're going to get what you're going to get, and that's what it is. But I think if you come into public service, and that could be in our government, local government, state government, could be a school district, or something like that, we should be talking about significant debt forgiveness for folks who go into public service. You know, what's the point? And as the young man said, you're not going to actually see the money. It's a paper transaction between two entities, and somebody's making something off of that. But I really want to encourage young folks to think about going into public service in the first place. And notwithstanding the fact that state and local governments lost 700,000 jobs while the private sector was going up, and as a result of the economic recovery program, there are opportunities. And I really want to encourage young people to think about public service. You may not do it for 20 years, but it is rewarding. The opportunity every day to do something positive in your community, to help somebody else, there is a psychological reward. There's a psychological benefit. Can't spend it at the supermarket, but there is a reward nonetheless for that kind of service. And so I think making sure that young people can go, and the president is obviously trying to deal with the costs, as the young man is talking about, but also once you get out, to be saddled with that kind of debt and then not be able to find a job, it probably, in many instances, nowhere near what your major was. That is a significant problem and a discouragement and a barrier for many young people today. So I want to focus on that one.
Great. Mayor Rawlings-Blake?
Yeah, I really can't add anything that hasn't already been said by this recent graduate. Yes, congratulations, and Mayor Nutter. I try not to talk about Sally Mae because it makes me start to curse, and I know that we're televised.
Yeah, right.
I said, hopefully, I always joke around. I said, I hope I don't see Sally Mae, but I hope she doesn't see me on the dark alley or on the dark night when they're running around. Because, you know, for our generation, we say it in jest, but, you know, it's almost like this, and I don't want to sound too extreme, but it's almost like this indentured servitude. You know, that we are working to pay off student debt, you know, not to really achieve our goals. And I know people in my generation and yours don't want to be in that situation. You know, so we have to, of course, do everything we can to look for ways that we can encourage debt forgiveness, work with our state governments to control the cost of local college education. I know that we've worked very hard in Maryland to keep the cost of in-state tuition down for years, but we've got to find a way for young people who want more for themselves to get it without sacrificing their future?
I'm going to go to Congressman Richmond, but I just want to throw this question out for people to think about, because I work at an academic institution. When are we going to start requiring academic institutions to guarantee something for the money they pay? You only owe $30,000. People leave college going to graduate school having a $100,000 debt, and then getting debt in the graduate school. And you can't do that. And so I just want you to think about that for a second. I'm going to come back to you, but I want to go to Congressman Richmond now. What do we do about that, and do we make universities, private and public, in some sense responsible? If you're going to get my money, you're going to get me a job or get me some way to pay off that debt.
Well, let me just say this, and Stephanie, I don't want you to feel like you're alone. Sally Mae calls me like I owe her child support. But let me, you're laughing a little too hard. Let me give you this fact that not many people know, and when I tell you it's going to upset you. But the federal government last year made $55 billion off of student loans. There's some things we ought not make money on. So if we can loan banks money at little interest so that they can stimulate the economy, then we ought to be able to loan money to students at that same rate to stimulate their minds and push for education. So if you're talking about us, in order for us to make $55 billion, we got to take it from somebody. And the problem is we're taking it from children who are trying to make a better way. And we keep saying that education is the best way to get yourself out of poverty, and it is. But we keep raising the barriers to get educated, and that's just unacceptable. Now, this administration is doing a lot in terms of college affordability and what Dr. Ogletree is talking about in terms of holding colleges accountable for the product they produce and also helping their students with job placement. And by no means will I give our HBCUs a pass or walk or be an enabler to inferior products or the push to employ their students. And I think that's something that we have to hold our institutions to a higher standard to do. But we shouldn't make money on student loans. And Dr. Ogletree, I'll just switch the conversation. When we talk about charter schools and traditional public schools, I would just say that everybody in the country, and my governor just wrote an op-ed to praise education reform in New Orleans. And I'm so sick and tired of hearing about education reform in New Orleans, and it's such a great model.
It's a failure.
It's not. What we are doing is creating a system where kids are going to do very good and kids are going to do very bad. The charter system can work, but as soon as you recommend changes to the charter system, our charter advocates get upset and pretend that you're just not an advocate for education. So here's what we're dealing with in New Orleans. Schools are advertising on billboards, on neutral grounds like politicians to get students into their schools, and some of them are very good schools. But too often, our children don't have parents that are engaged enough to go through the process. So if you don't have a parent that's engaged enough, then you're going to wind up going to a school with a whole bunch of other kids whose parents are not engaged, and we are creating alternative schools. So those great charter schools, they need an attendance zone requirement. A kid ought to be able to walk up, say, I live across the street and I want to go to this good school. But it's not happening, and we need to make sure that we talk about every child, not just a child with great parents, because those children are going to be okay. But we need to make sure that the kid whose parent is not engaged has the same opportunity. So as you will hear, you will see, and Mayor Nutter, you're doing the press club with my mayor in a few days. Don't let him talk about education reform and how great it is in New Orleans. Not that he's responsible for it, but I'm tired of hearing the picture that it's working so well. Because I coach those kids in Little League, and I see the disappointment in their eyes when they can't get into the few good schools we have in New Orleans, and they're pushed to a school that's not. So the charter movement and charter schools can work, given the right model. and the right push and the accountability. And we ought to all band together to make sure that we do something about this high stakes testing that's going around, because if you can't graduate and go to the next grade and get economic development in the right way, there is a culture that is welcoming you. You do not need to apply. You don't need a job application. You don't need a background check. There are kids there are dealers on every corner that are welcoming our kids who can't pass the high stakes test to go to the next grade. They're giving them an alternative, and we ought not let people do that. So there's high stakes testing, there's war on drugs. All of these things are contributing to the demise of our children, and we should stand up and say something about it.
Thank you. One quick comment, then I'm going to go to both Mayor Michael Nutter and Congresswoman Edwards. And that is, everybody knows that a charter school is a public school, but a charter school is not a panacea. It's not a guarantee that children are going to be educated and educated well. Mayor Nutter, and then come back to Congresswoman
Congressman
Edwards.
Richmond, I can assure you, Mayor Landrieu and I know what each other are going to say. We're going to be talking about public safety and the crisis, the epidemic, which we touched on earlier, which is black on black crime. And what's going on in our communities. But with regard to public education, and I know that oftentimes there is this discussion about district managed schools versus charter schools. What we're trying to create in Philadelphia is an environment of a system of great schools and great options for parents. And so you have to have the political will that if a district managed school is not doing well and students are not learning, you have to make changes. But you have to have the same will on the charter school side as well. And as the professor said, they are public schools. They're a part of a solution. They're a part of a strategy. But there is no one single way to educate a child. That is a very personal relationship between the child and the teacher in the classroom. The issue for us is also about resources. Pennsylvania is one of only 3 states in the United States of America that does not use a student-weighted formula to distribute funds. The others are Delaware and North Carolina. Wow. Our system is a bunch of folks go in the room toward the tail end of the budget process and decide this is how much we're going to spend on education this year in Pennsylvania. We're the largest school system in the state, and the funds get distributed. And so this is really about accountability. It's about managing the resources that we have. But for us, it's also about having a student-weighted formula that takes into consideration the differences between and among the 500 school districts in Pennsylvania, and that urban education can be slightly different or more costly than rural or suburban. When we talk about students going on to college, and Professor, I thought you were going here, and I'll close with this. It's not only the issue of how much it costs or how much debt you leave with, but it's also, you know, I love going to the opening day of school, but what I really love is graduation day. Right. So it's not how many folks matriculate, it's how many folks graduate. That's right. And we need to make sure that the folks who are going in are able to come back sophomore year, come back junior year, and are walking down the aisle at the end of 4 or 5 years, however long that might take. And so again, this issue about student debt, going into public service, going to AmeriCorps, going to City Year. I mean, these are all opportunities for our young folks as they try to figure out in this 21st century environment how they're going to move forward. But I think the accountability issue also has to look at how many went in and how many came out.
Absolutely. Congresswoman Edwards.
Thank you very much. And you know, Mayor Nutter and particularly Mayor Rawlings-Blake, I mean, you know, Mayor, that we come from a state in Maryland that touts itself as having the #1 schools in the country for, I think, 5 years running. But we also know that there are huge gaps in schools where students are succeeding and where they're not. And I think it's important that we focus on those gaps. I mostly approach, you know, the K-12 education. I'm a parent. And so as a parent, I think, I don't care whether it's a charter school or it's a basement or wherever it is, I want my child to be educated. And I want my child to be successful. And so I think that we have to get, in some ways, sort of get off the labeling of where that happens and focus on what is happening in that place. And I know that you share that view. I paid off my last student loan 1 month to the day that I was elected to the United States House of Representatives, $100,000 in student loans. The difference today is that because those loans are being made out of the Department of Education, and I agree, we shouldn't be making money off of it. It should be put back into the system to lower interest rates and to lower costs for students. But the difference is I paid my student loan, a quarter of it, back to the cottage industry that was running the student loan program. So I don't like that either. A lot of people don't even quite know yet, for our current students, when they receive a student loan today, and they repay, they get out of school and begin repaying, that is now, because of what we did under the Affordable Care Act, that is now based on your income and ability to repay, which some of us sitting here on this dais know that it wasn't based on our ability to repay. So I think that's a good thing. I think that we have a lot to do, again, to match up the skills that people are coming out with and the workforce. And our institutions of higher education have an obligation to make sure that that is a better match, because they know and we know that when students are coming out with degrees that aren't going to quite get them into the workforce, you're on your own. And so I think we have to put some more responsibility on these institutions to make that match, and tie it to what is happening in the workforce. And then lastly, I would say this, and I want to go back to our returning citizens question. I'm going to just very briefly, when I was running for Congress, I ran into a young man, and I will never forget his face, and he had the hand of a little boy. He was 20 years old, had just gotten out of prison, and he was with his 3-year-old son. And he said to me, all I want to do is go to college. I've been accepted into college. I've taken my SAT test, but I can't get a Pell Grant, and I can't get a student loan. And he said, and if I can't do that, I have to take care of my little boy any way I know how. And the way that I know how is to go back to the criminal life that I just got released from. And so I just leave that with you, because if we can't do something for that young man, and more than that, for that 3-year-old who's holding his father's hand, then we have really missed the mark. And that really is about public policy, and there is no excuse that as a Congress, we can't make that one little fix to the student loan and Pell Grant program.
We have in the audience someone with a microphone for a couple of questions before we take a break, and we're going to have time for our panelists to make a very brief comment, not a closing statement, a closing argument, but a comment. So you should think about what one lesson you want people to leave with. And I just wanted to say one thing that hasn't been discussed today. It's amazing. My father dropped out of school from Alabama in the 4th grade, my mother from Arkansas in the 10th grade. So they had no formal education, but they pushed me to go on to get an education. And what made a difference, it wasn't the school. I love libraries, and that's where I learned things that I couldn't imagine ever happening. And now look around, in the 21st century, libraries are closing everywhere. The whole idea that they're not open on weekends, not open at nights, that was the savings grace for a poor kid from California to go to the library every Saturday, check out 10 books, and make an enormous amount of difference. So I think we have to talk about that as well in terms of what are the resources locally that would make a big difference. And I'm going to come back to all of our panelists for their comments. Dr. Mackey, you want to make a quick comment before we do that?
These are the policymakers, but I want to talk about what we need to be considering as people looking at the policymakers. They can make the policy, but there's things that we need to do. Last year, the number of black males entering med school was at a 32-year low. You can reduce the loan. That wasn't a loan issue. I started college in remedial reading and developmental mathematics. I grew up in a house with no books. My mother and father both died pretty much functionally illiterate. I got 4 degrees, 1 in math, 3 in engineering, and after 11 years, I graduated with no college, with no loan, no debt, and $100,000 in liquid assets. So what we're doing in New Orleans now, we started something called STEM Saturdays with Dr. Mackey, where we're taking 100 kids every Saturday and putting them into, I'm talking about from 7 years old or 13 years old, and putting them into science, technology, engineering, and mathematics camps, letting them work with kids to expose them to things that otherwise may be transformative in their life. Now, I know everyone wasn't built or made to be a scientist, a technologist, an engineer, a mathematician, or a doctor, but you cannot tell me 32 years later we got fewer black men going to med school than before. It's something that, look, we got to make sure that our kids take advantage of the things. People paid for me to go to school like I was an athlete. We talking about athletes need to get paid. If you majoring in science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and you go to graduate school, you get paid. Companies pay you. And if we know that, then maybe we can start doing things on the front end with our first graders and second graders to let them know that just like athletes, if you doing what you're supposed to do, companies and colleges gonna come recruit you just like Michael Vick.
Right.
And we won't have those discussions, but we want to have the discussions about, you know, the degrees not matching, and that is absolutely true. So we have to let our people know what is possible for them.
Absolutely. Now, we also, and I think this session proves it, we have to go to young people, not expect everybody to come to us. We have to reach out to them halfway and make sure that they appreciate it. We have 2 questions. They have to be very short, and the panel, you can do it to a panelist or to the panel, and they'll respond. First question, microphone. Let them know what's going on.
Hello, how are you? My name is Miles Smith. I'm from Cleveland, Ohio. I want to thank you all for being up here and giving us the info. I like what the young brother said before about his grandmother and the people instill these values and morals in you. What the question I have is, what is your thought of the value of the spirit, its characteristics, functions, abilities, and how it works in synchrony with the mind and body to achieve prosperity, no matter how the economic situation and policies of the society being added to the public schools?
What was the end of it? You were referring to...
Anybody want to take that one?
I'll take it. So you're saying your spirit life. I'll say this.
The value of it.
The value of the spirit life. My answer to that, I'll go straight to the African American church. The reason why the African American church has been so significant in our community is that it is the place that we've gone for value and a sense of worth. When the world and the broader society said that African Americans weren't equal citizens, weren't worth anything, you got inside the institution of the church, and you were a deacon or a deaconess or a minister or a pastor, and you were given a sense of identity. And your sense of self-worth didn't necessarily come from just the church. It came from the transformative relationship that we have with the love of Jesus, understanding who you are. Now, that's my faith tradition, understanding that my value doesn't come from the Constitution. It doesn't come from society looking at me either as a criminal or a college graduate. My value comes from the way God sees me. But if you're spiritual and your spirituality, there's something that created you, that you came to be with, and it was some type of word that was spoken that allowed you to be. So I'll say this, you have to search yourself with all due diligence and find the truth of who you're created to be and live that truth fearlessly, unapologetically, with all radical love so that you transform yourself and your reality, whatever you have going on. So that means getting within yourself and saying, am I born to be a father, to be a public servant? If I am born to do jobs my first job was Taco Bell, and at that point in time, that's what I needed to do. That was the truth of where I was supposed to be. But I did it with all nobility and dignity and courage. And the same thing I would say to anybody. There's dignity in work and there's dignity in your purpose. You're not necessarily going to be the president of the United States. But whatever you're called to be so with unapologetically and fearlessly, regardless of what this world decides to place value on, because you are significant regardless.
Our next question is actually coming from young people who have been up since before 6 a.m. this morning in San Francisco, and they're going to pose a question to the panel, and then we'll take a question from the audience. San Francisco question, the Google question.
Good morning, how are y'all doing?
Great, good morning to you.
Excellent, yes, it is a good and early morning over here, but we're pleased to be here. My name is Edward James. I'm a 23-year-old data analyst here at Google, as well as a member of the Black Youth Project 100. I'm also joined by 2 other members of the Black Youth Project 100, Tiara Fallon and Jazz Hudson. So the question that we have for you is, as you all would probably agree, knowledge of self is essential in the full educational development of children of any race. And this knowledge of self, however, is generally made available to those of European or of white descent. So what are you doing in your respective districts and cities to ensure that a more holistic and Afrocentric curricula is taught in schools outside of the month of February?
All right, let's start with Congresswoman Edwards and then Congressman Richmond. What's happening in terms of the federal level? What are you doing to make sure of a diverse curriculum for young people?
We hold on to race in America. So at a state level in Louisiana, you understand that not much is happening in terms of curriculum and that. But I will tell you that what I do, and I try to everywhere I go, is to make sure that people understand, and I think that it's probably one of those things they brainwash us at Morehouse, is that you can't be apologetic about it. I'm black and I'm proud and I'm successful, but we have to go into schools so that our kids can see it. And then the curriculum part is very important because we have to know our history and we have to know how far we have come, and we have to know what we can achieve. And part of that goes back to the spirituality part. And I'm not the person to quote Bible verses because I just don't do that. But I do listen to gospel music because that gives me my drive and the strength to do it. But it's like the gospel song that says, Lord, don't move my mountain, give me the ability to climb. So we have to make sure that we continue to let our kids know about the great people who came before them, the shoulders we stand on, because it is very critical that they know the challenges that people before them overcame, so that they know that they can do the same thing. So we just have to keep pushing, and I don't think that it's something that only can be done in the classroom. It has to be done all the time. I mean, we have to talk about our success, and we have to know that we don't have to apologize about being African American. And the sad part, and it's not me, Ben Jealous said it best, our children not only have to worry about the thugs in the neighborhood, but they have to be scared of the police too. And we need to make sure that we give our kids the confidence that they don't have to be afraid of the police just because they're African American.
Thank you. I want to get these questions on. These are the final.
But he asked, I wanted to give him a solution.
Quickly.
Yeah, what we're doing in New Orleans is that we've created something called a life program, Living Intelligently Forever. Our children know how to die. The problem is they don't know how to live. So we go into schools and we do an hour of socio-emotional, cultural impact with African-American males in the city of New Orleans, and we've done that with over 500 males over the last 300 years. And ed reform, that have allowed us to go into schools, because I keep asking the charter schools, okay, when are you going to insert the soul? We could train our kids, skills, but the question is, when are we going to deal with them as men? So therefore, we've created a framework to allow men and women to go into schools and deal with kids with those socio-emotional cultural needs that need to be handled, that's not handled in the curriculum.
Thank you very much. We're going to have the three people in line to briefly state their question, and it should be 8 words or less. We're going to hear all 3 questions, and anybody you can say it's to a person or to the panel, but we're not going to take more than 1 or 2 responses. First question.
Rosa Holmes Turner. I don't know if I can get 8 words, but from your program that you have when you're doing program for women in non-traditional careers and addressing your single parent women and everything else, how are you implementing engineering and technology? I'm in Tidewater, Virginia, and I am one of the only nuclear engineers or chemical engineering representatives. There's only 0.034 women that have a master's degree in engineering continue on. And so what we've done in ours for single parents and everything else is not to educate them on to become a child care worker or a hair salon worker or barber or something like that, but how are you implementing the same things that they would do to be a receptionist, to do Word, Microsoft, and PowerPoint, to use those same skills and be a project manager on a multi-million-dollar construction project, highway project, or anything else.
Okay, that's good. All right, that's for Dr. Mackey. Next question.
Good morning. My name is Yvonne Gist, and I worked at the Census Bureau for 30 years. And what I really want to question is that, are we aware that the Census Bureau pads the numbers so that it looks like, well, I'll just give you an example. I did the state of Maryland to see how many, what I feel are minority population. According to the Census Bureau 2010 census population, they said that we had 39% minorities. According to my calculations, they're 43.5% minorities, percentage of minorities. And I feel that we could elect more congressmen, just elected officials of minority races if we were to carefully look at and examine the Census Bureau calculations.
Okay, let's see if anybody wants to quickly answer. The first one's to you, Dr. Mackey. You want to answer the first question?
Yes. In my alternative energy business, the first two people we hired, one was a man, but the other one was a female. And she is by far the best operator we have at running our plant. So I really felt good about that, because now when we bring little girls to the plant, we do these STEM tours and bring them to the plant, they actually see a woman in there with locks pulled back running this, this micro refinery. So our program is not just set up, for black males and black females, but it's established for everybody. The STEM Saturdays thing, I'm getting pressure now to start one just for females. Because now, you start having this interaction between the boy and the girls, and the mother saying, we think they need to be some type of just focus on the females so we can deal with other issues. And we're recruiting young ladies from Xavier University to work with the females. So we're just trying to expose them to what is possible.
Anybody on the second question? Any response, comments? Yep, Mayor Nutter?
No, I was...
you were pointing to somebody else.
Yeah, I was encouraging our members of Congress.
I'll only say this, because right now we've just finished with one census, and so we have those numbers and we have to work with them. The challenge that we always have for all of our communities, and even as we think now, working up to 2020, is to make certain that we all do our part in making sure that every single person in our communities is counted, because it's the difference between the road money that you get, the money that you get for your schools, the money that you get for your hospitals, and all of the rest of that. And I think that's important. The United States Census Bureau is actually located in my congressional district. All of those employees, a lot of them live in my congressional district. I love the work that they do. I think that they're doing fantastic work. Can we always do better? Absolutely we can. And again, it starts with us.
We're out of time. I'm going to ask the panelists to just give a one sentence, what do you need to do? What's next? Start with Andre coming this way.
Well, I'll speak to my generation, millennials. There's this kind of large notion that millennials have lackadaisical attitudes about what we want to do and where we want to go. I'd say that we should take firm grasp of our identity and our destinies, in the sense that we are very hardworking. We have goals that are rooted not in necessarily materialism, but goals that should be rooted in value of our work and purpose connected to our work. I would also say that I spoke to my debt, my student loan debt. It is the best investment that I've ever made. My Morehouse education was one of the most transformative experiences that I've ever had in my life. So I say to you, go to school, finish your high school, enhance your education, and never stop dreaming. And not dreaming with your eyes closed, not dreaming while you're sleeping, but dreaming with your eyes wide open, making goals, making plans, and accomplishing those things, because that's the real change.
Okay, that's it. Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake.
First, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. I want to thank all the panelists, and my prayer for those who patronize this transformational week every year is that you don't come back next year unless you've done something different in your community to bring somebody else up.
Excellent. Mayor Nutter.
Thanks also for the opportunity to be here. Vote. Never give up on yourself. Hold elected officials accountable, but make sure that you're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing as well.
Dr. Mackey?
Study as hard as you can, work as hard as you can, make as much money as you can, help who you can, share as much as you can, but definitely put something in the can, then sit on the can.
Do you ever open up that can?
The can theory.
Okay. Congressman Richmond?
Why do I have to follow him? Let me just say, it's not about politics. It's not about profit. It has to be about purpose. And I would just ask, when you leave here today, every day when you wake up, just remember, how do we make this world a better place?
There it is.
And you can do that, whether it's giving someone food, as we fight the Republicans from cutting $40 billion from food stamps, or whether it's helping a sick person or a homeless person. Do what you can, because we have to remember this is about purpose. And I will close with the fact that Obamacare is a very significant title to something that's going to give millions of people health care, extend people's lives, and be very transformative for years and generations to come. So just remember, it's about purpose. let's change the world.
Thank you. Congressman Donna Edwards.
Thank you. And I'll just finish by saying, first of all, I really appreciate being here and being here with you. I am excited and energized. I really want to thank all of our panelists, because I think I have, you know, a new vision in mind in terms of the way that I want to think going forward. I hope that you have too. I hope that you will use this conference as a way to learn, to network, and then, as all of my colleagues here have said, as a way to do something, and to do something that's important in people's lives.
Thank you. Let me just say this in closing. This panel has been absolutely wonderful, and I hope they've addressed a lot of the issues facing us in the 21st century. And I would just say this, the past is really prologue. As a kid growing up, I remember people saying things like, "We shall overcome." That didn't sound like very progressive, but those people took beatings, hoses, dogs, and everything, and to open up doors for us. I remember them singing this song, "I'm climbing up the rough side of the mountain." I'm saying, wait, why are you climbing up the rough side? Why don't you go on the other side? But it was rough, and they smoothed it out so that we could benefit from it as well. And I think that the greatest lesson we can learn is from a philosopher that I've studied over and over all my life. And his words ring true with me today as they did many, many years ago. And he said this, "I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Open up the door, now get it myself." That's Reverend Dr. James Brown.
Yes.
And I think that is where we are today. The path has been opened for us, and we have to make sure that we keep it open for the next generation. Thank you all for coming here for the national program for the Congressional Black Caucus. We'll see you at the rest of the events. Take care now.
Thank you.
Baltimore.